Got a question for you today. Is it okay to start playing dirty versions of songs when you're playing at adult parties? For a long time, most of us said no way, no how. But it seems like the goalpost keeps changing, and I think I know why. I saw an interesting question on the DJ Help Desk. Cedric Jones is asking, is it frowned upon to play the clean versions at clubs or bars? Sorry, it's been a while. We're not talking about kids' parties here. We're talking about bars and clubs, or adult parties for that matter. I'll read you some of the responses to his question. When you play the clean versions, people sing the dirty lyrics anyway. Yeah, Little John, Get Low, yeah, they're singing the dirty stuff anyway. Even going back to the 80s with Moni Moni, the hey, hey, what? Ever played a school dance, played the squeaky clean version of a song, and the kids are screaming the dirty lyrics anyway? And then you get yelled at because the kids are misbehaving? Yeah. It's a minefield out there, DJs. It always has been. Well, I shouldn't say always. It has been since probably the 90s. But let me tell you why I thought this was so interesting. It started happening to me around the time of COVID. When I started doing gigs again, people wanted to hear the dirty versions of songs. Stop playing these clean versions. Well, I'm subscribed to services like Promo Only and Top Hits USA. I don't get dirty versions of these songs. I get the clean versions of these songs, the FCC radio approved versions of these songs. So I don't even have the dirty one to play for you. There were other times where people would request songs at a mobile event that I do. And it was something that there was no clean version of. And it had explicit lyrics and content in it. I'm like, well, what do you want me to do? I can't find a clean version. Well, we didn't ask for the clean version. Just play the dirty version. There's a friend of mine that I've been talking to for many, many years. And I brought this up to him, around the time of COVID, or when COVID was kind of chilling out and I was doing gigs again, that people were starting to really want the dirty versions of songs, that I feel like my hands are tied because there's no clean versions available sometimes of the songs they're asking for that I have to download and bring to the event. And he said, hey man, look, if somebody wants me to play the dirty version of a song, I'm going to say, hey look, thank you, but I don't need this gig. I pass. I'm not that kind of DJ. But last week, he asked me, hey, have you noticed that people want to hear dirty versions of songs? Should I start playing them? Like he did a 180 on this. He hadn't experienced it yet. Something that I had been experiencing since, like I said, around the time of COVID. What happened? I think I know. Here's what I think happened. Up until recently, let's say the last 10 years, most music that people consumed, they got from radio. And in America, we have the FCC, Federal Communications Commission, that dictates what type of content you can and cannot broadcast. And most people were hearing the clean versions of songs. And so that's kind of what you played. The clean version was also the familiar version, which made it nice. I never thought of it as clean and dirty. I thought of it as familiar and album version, maybe. Because, being familiar and being clean were the perfect match. Perfect. Cool. I get both things. I'm not upsetting anybody who would be offended. And these are the familiar versions of the songs. Thinking about the Groove Armada song. I See You Baby, Shaking That Thing. That was the version everybody heard on the radio. But there was a dirty version that said, I See You Baby, Shaking That Ass, Shaking That Ass. Well, the ass version wasn't the version that most people were familiar with. They were more familiar with the Thang version. I think Thang rolled off the tongue better anyway. But let's say they weren't listening to it on the radio, which is what has happened over the last 10 or so years. People are consuming music in a different way. They're listening to streaming services. So the FCC hasn't gotten to them. And most of the time, these streaming services are playing the explicit versions of songs. So now the explicit version is not the familiar version. So we find ourselves in this weird place. Or I do anyway. Explicit content in music is nothing new. It's always been. If you go back 100 years, literally 100 years, before any of us were here, including myself, you had Cole Porter. Cole Porter was kind of like the big pop songwriter of the 1920s. Most of the stuff that Frank Sinatra sang back in the early days were Cole Porter songs. He had a song that comes to mind: birds do it, bees do it. Let's do it. Let's fall in love. We know the birds and the bees is about sex, but he doesn't say sex. He says let's fall in love. So it's innuendo. It gets a pass. If you fast forward to the 1950s, there were these things called party records. Party records were usually comedy records. You didn't go to the record store and see them on the shelf. You had to ask for them behind the counter. They're for adult parties. You put them on at parties, like Red Fox comedy records and such, where he's telling dirty jokes. I mean, that kind of stuff was just not acceptable back then. You had to have it behind the counter. Then, I don't know, I guess probably in, what was it, the late 60s, early 70s, you had a guy called Blowfly who was doing dirty songs. And again, party records. The songs weren't great songs, but they were funny. You weren't used to hearing four-letter words and that type of explicit content in songs, so it was funny that he sang about it. It was comedy. Even in the early days of hip-hop, I mean, there weren't a lot of, explicit lyrics in that. If I think about where there were explicit lyrics, it was in rock, and it was buried, and it usually slipped past the censors. The Who has a song called Who Are You? He drops the F-bomb in that song. I've heard it on the radio just like that many times. Pink Floyd, Money. He says bullshit in the song, and the radio plays it, and nobody loses their mind and nobody gets killed. I am not the moral cop. I am not here to say what people should and shouldn't listen to. I'm not here to infringe on anybody's art as a DJ or otherwise. But I don't want to offend anybody either. So it's kind of a fine line, right? I think when it got weird for me is when this record came out. Two Live Crew. As nasty as they want to be. Song in here called Me So Horny. You probably know it. A friend of mine played this song for me for the first time, and I laughed. It was just ridiculous that they were singing about this stuff, the way they were singing about it. It was funny, but the song wasn't half bad either. So you heard it in the club, and I started playing it at bars and clubs too, unedited. Eventually, they came out with a record called As Clean As They Want to Be. And yeah, I could have played the clean version, but you know what? The clean version wasn't as funny. It was funny that they were dropping the F-bombs and saying the things they were saying in the explicit version of the song. So for a long time, I think it was about, comedy. And then, like I said, once in a while, slipped into rock lyrics. But then you had bands or groups that came along, especially in hip-hop, where it was explicit and angry. It wasn't funny anymore. And a lot of euphemisms for race started to get dropped in songs that I can't say because I'm incredibly too white to say those things. And you had to get an edited version of that song to play on the radio. And you started getting into these clean and explicit versions of songs. But it's not like dirty is new. I mean, Frankie Goes to Hollywood, relax, don't do it. I mean, come on, what do you think he's singing about there? But it's innuendo. Or it's going over people's heads. It's not explicit. And that's the key word, explicit. So, starting in the 90s, as DJs, we had to seek out clean versions of songs, which were also the familiar versions of songs. So it worked on two levels. It's the versions they were familiar with, and it was clean. If you played an explicit version of a song, you might shock somebody because they may have never heard that before. I know my mom went on, I think it was Amazon Music. She's a big Maroon 5 fan. I know. She's almost 84 years old, and she loves Maroon 5. It blew her mind that Room 5 was singing these lyrics in these songs that she'd never heard before, because she consumes most of her music off of the radio, or even TV, whatever, videos, whatever. She consumes it that way. So when she heard the explicit lyrics, it was shocking to her. But if most people are consuming their music through streaming services, then the clean version's unfamiliar now. We find ourselves in this, like I said, this really weird place because of it, right? I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. I do know that I have stepped in and played songs late at night that people have requested at mobile gigs that I've had to download and get because they really wanted to hear it. So we don't have a problem with it. In my mind, I'm thinking, yeah, but it makes me look bad because I'm the DJ playing this stuff. But if there's only adults in the room, I don't know why it matters that much. I would rather not play the explicit versions of songs, but when you're not given a choice, when you cannot get a clean version of a song, yeah, you could clean it up, but then they'll tell you, we don't want you to clean it up. Would never do it at school, would never do it at any event where you had age groups from 7 to 70 kind of thing. This is something that's an adult party. This is a bar, this is a club. But even at the bars and the clubs, I am not going to go back and find all the dirty versions of the songs that I've been collecting for the last 25 years that are clean. I've paid a lot of money for this stuff and spent a lot of time, what word am I looking for? Cultivating this clean music library with hits. I'm not going to go back and change that now. So you get what you get with me. So that's it. That's our video for today. I hope it helps somebody. And if you've got something to say about this, let us know in the comment section. Love to hear it. And before we end this video, I'm well aware my Instagram was hacked today. It is November 29th, and I'm getting messages like mad about this. I haven't used Instagram. I never understood it. I signed up for it, and I bounced all my stuff from Facebook onto it. But I don't get it, so I never go on it. If you're seeing it and it's hacked, report it, I guess. I can't. I've tried. They've changed my email and phone number on my own account. I can't even get into it. And in the meantime, everybody's getting messages about Bitcoin. So please report the account if you can. I'd appreciate it. Also, I'd be curious as to where you normally find me. Are you finding me on Instagram? Are you finding me on Facebook? Or are you finding me on YouTube? I think most people are finding me on YouTube. I don't think these other social media platforms are doing me much good here. Anyway, that's it. I appreciate you guys so much for tuning in. Let me know what you think of the subject in the video today down here. We'll see you next time. Practice and enjoy.